round this first segment off by giving us some information in reference to his experiences and et cetera, and then we'll be able to move into that second segment. Let's start off with you by talking about your background, education, and some of your experiences, Mr. Buford.
Thank you, Dr. Haney. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I was born out south Nashville, moved to East Nashville. Early on in my life, I had a lot of issues at home, dysfunctional family, found myself doing some bad things in life. Ended up in the juvenile detention center at 16. I was there for about 6 months. In less than 9 months, I was charged with felony murder. And I ended up pleading guilty to a life and 20 years sentence. And I was caged for 26 years of my life at 7 different prisons throughout the state of Tennessee. I was released June the 25th, 2015. Since then, I enrolled in American Baptist College. I am presently, currently a junior. I work with the Children's Defense Fund Nashville team, and our mission is to disrupt and dismantle the cradle to prison pipeline. I founded the Unheard Voices Outreach. Our organization is specifically designed to empower formerly incarcerated persons. And I penned a book titled Save Your Own Life. Choosing the right path is not always clear for troubled youth. I go into the juvenile detention centers every Thursday, and I facilitate critical reading, writing, and dialogue sessions with young youth under the P3 project, which is plugging the pipeline to prison.
Very good. Pastor Walker.
Yes, I'm Pastor KWalker, born here in Nashville, Tennessee. Been on your show numerous times, and glad to be back here again this morning on your show as well. I'm a military Navy veteran. Also, I'm an ex-offender, served time in the Tennessee State prison system for various crimes. As a result of my 17-plus years of drug addiction, which, of course, didn't end when I was incarcerated because there's just enough drugs in there as it is on the outside, just a little bit more difficult to get. But back in 1986, on August 24th to be exact, God broke that drug addiction in my life, called me directly into ministry. And ever since then, I've been doing ministry, works of ministry in the church, and also advocating more so outside of the pulpit on behalf of people incarcerated in the prison system, people who are homeless, people who are drug addicted. And that's where I met Mr. Rehim1NEW out there at River Bend Maximum Security Prison through an organization called New Beginnings. And we formed a relationship out there at the prison. And it's I'm so grateful to see him on this side. Because, I've always talked about Dr. Haney throughout the years of coming on your program about that signal that's beamed from the courtroom through the judicial process all the way to the gates of the prison system. Then when we get there, we drop them off and fail to realize that there is a positive side of incarceration. So we're here with Mr. Buford to actually highlight and show that positive side of incarceration. A very articulate gentleman, very smart, very knowledgeable of what's going on. And he's got out, formed an organization called Unheard Voices. And that's what we want to talk about, because we're talking about helping and empowering ex-offenders once they get out, because there's such a shortage of programs and opportunities for us as ex-offenders when we're out. When you think about it, man, my last conviction was back in the mid-'80s, early 80s, 83 to be exact. And I can go apply for a job right now today, and my record can prohibit me from getting that job. And, that's sad. When do we stop serving these life sentences? You get 1129. I had one, but it was just part of my sentences. But you can get 1129 today and be branded as a life offender, because for the rest of your life, that felony conviction will follow you. And it's organizations like his that's designed to help empower people, to help them overcome many of the obstacles out there. And I'm anxious to hear him talk more and more about it during your show today.
As a matter of fact, Mr. Buford, let's over the next it's almost, this segment has almost ended. But when we come back, what we want you to do is to start us off by giving us some information in reference to your book, because I think we showcased it once here, but give us some information about the book and some of the things in reference to your organization, so that we might use you as an example this morning of what can be done, because I think that many people are aware of some of the problems that we have with our young people, and I think that you've already indicated that you were one of those problem children at one time, and so something that you might be able to say when we come back for the second segment that will turn some of these young men and young women around, and so that's what we'll do. And so we're going to take our first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.
That's an honor to be here. I mean, you know, if it weren't from you, man, I don't think I probably would even had an Unheard Voices outreach. You know, just coming in there and breathing life into us. And
say that, make notice of that too, because I think that I'm aware of when he said the New Beginnings program. I know about that program, and so that's when he got in touch with you dealing with that program, and et cetera. And so he has had a tremendous impact upon your life, and say something about that, you know, and then give him a little press this morning. You said, and let him take about 4 minutes. You take about 4 or 5 minutes, and then let him take the 4 minutes and sort of say something. Then we'll have that 10-minute segment to wrap it up. But I think this is exactly what we want to see. Because every morning you turn on the television. This morning there was 3 young men. Robbed somebody, took somebody's car. You know, and carjacking it. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Buford and Pastor Walker in reference to the criminal justice system in Tennessee. Mr. Buford, let's see if we can start off this segment by having you to say something about your book and then something about the organization in which you are a part of, and then I think you'll have an opportunity to make some statements in reference to those young men that we were talking about.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you again, Dr. Haney. But first, before I speak on the book, I just want to speak about it's important to pay homage to those who go into the prisons, like my brother here, Pastor Walker, because had it not been for him, I don't think I have an Unheard Voices outreach, because it was through him that our voices came out into this world. And I don't think we give enough credit to individuals who go in and out of the prisons. Those are some of the unsung heroes, and I just think that we need to recognize them more. But as it relates to my book, Save Your Own Life, Choosing the Right Path is not always clear. It's on Amazon. I penned this book specifically for at-risk youth, because what I've learned is the cradle to prison pipeline begins in school with the literacy scores. And they know by 3rd grade, if you can't read, there's a likelihood that you're going to end up in prison. So with that in mind, as I was writing the book in prison, it's a compilation of short poems and short prose, and it's interactive. And it's more about asking the question, who am I? Because these young kids who are out in this world messing up do not have a clue as to their identities, because they are following the wrong people, whether it be gangs, whether it be older people in their lives. They're acting out in ways that they really don't understand, and their behavior is saying something that they do not have the intellect or the vocabulary to express intelligently. So as it relates to my organization, Unheard Voices Outreach, half of the board are formerly incarcerated persons who have excelled without going through programs. One of our members is an attorney here in Nashville. One of our members is an entrepreneur. One of our members is just an ordinary, everyday working person. One of our members is an advocate, a national advocate, who goes around the country to help remove juvenile life sentences. And the other half of our board are individuals who go into prisons or help people transition out of prisons. What's unique about it is that we take responsibility for our own, in the sense that those of us who are formerly incarcerated, because we want to move away from that ex-offender language, because that's system language. It dehumanizes. So we will either say formerly incarcerated or returning citizen. If we're talking about persons on the inside, we're talking about insiders or prisoners, because one of the things that we have decided to do is reclaim the narrative, because we were human beings before we were labeled as
convicts.
Yes, sir. And so if we allow that language to be how we identify ourselves, it's no wonder that 75% of individuals who go into the prison system throughout the United States of America will return in 5 years. And so we are doing what is called customized release plans. So we want to sit with individuals and find out what their goals, their dreams, their aspirations are. And how can we facilitate? Where can we find stakeholders? How can we partner with the churches, the congregations of faith? Who wants to be a stakeholder so that we can make contributions and be the leaders in transition? We want to move away from the nonprofit industrial complex, where our images and our lives, our stories are being used to bring in large sums of monies, but when we ask if we can work in those particular nonprofits, we cannot. And so why not empower ourselves to demonstrate that we can do this work ourselves if we just get the support of the community? We don't want to blame, we don't want to point fingers. We want to say that some of us were transformed, others have not been transformed. But if you give us an opportunity to go back into the prisons like Pastor Walker, create some programs that we know will work because we know what happened for us, I guarantee you that this system can be changed overnight, but they have to give us an opportunity. And as it relates to the young men who are constantly out there committing these violent acts, we have to deal with the root of the problem. A lot of this violence starts in the home. We live in a nation of violence. We can't ignore that fact that it's even in the national anthem, but it doesn't excuse the behavior. So what people like myself have to do, and others, we have to go in and get in proximity with these young men and listen to what they're going through. And when you find out some of the abuses that these young men have suffered, you'll probably understand why. It doesn't excuse it, but our approach to justice cannot be retributive justice. It has to be restorative justice or transformative justice. And this asks the question, who was harmed? How do we approach healing? And this begins with those who have survived crimes. We move away from victimization and get into those who survive. We move away from offender and we use language like those who caused injuries. And when we start changing the language, other things change as well.
Very good. What do you think about that, Pastor?
You know, that's something. One thing I picked up on is taking away and removing those labels. You know, because as I sit here and I introduced myself and I said I was an ex-offender, and to be one to. I put that label right there on myself that they removed it, you know, and you know, it just enlightened me right there. Yeah, I committed crimes, but I am a formerly incarcerated individual. And from this point forward, I'll stop using that label because I'm trying to remove those labels, and that was effective right then and now at this particular moment. It had an effect, so I can imagine the effect that it's having across the board, you know, and taking those labels away and redefining it, you know, taking it back, you know, and taking it away from them that says we are this and we are that, and just dispelling that. And it's been
identifying yourself and saying who you are,
absolutely,
regardless of what your situation might have been. Now you are what?
In other words, don't identify me by my past. You know, I did what they said I did. I did all those things, but I'm not who they say I am. I am Kelvin L. Walker. That's who I am. It's my mother who she named me, and that's what she named me. And I have character traits and things like that are of a higher standard than they were when I was out there in the streets doing what I was doing. And another thing he said talked about the way they look at the third graders in their reading and to determine who's going to be incarcerated. You know, and they take those figures. Right now, I presently got a third grade grandson in Indiana that each and every day over the phone, he reads to me for 20 minutes every day because they've done a study that children that read for 20 minutes every day, they will become proficient in reading. And they got these tests that they have to pass, you know, in order for them to move on to the next grade. So we're making a determined effort to make sure that he's a proficient reader, because as a child, one of the things that I was a proficient reader. Man, I love to read, and I thank God now for my second grade teacher, Mrs. Hale, that encouraged my family to get me all these books and stuff because she noticed that this child likes to read. And as a result of that, man, I've got a library at home, and I read, you know, I read studiously and consistently. I don't just read to say I read a book, I read to get the knowledge from the book.
Very good. So what we'll do, Pastor, we'll take this second commercial break, and then we'll come back and give the two of you an opportunity to round us out for the morning. We'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Okay, so we'll start off again with you, and we've got 10 minutes, and so you take about 3 or 4 minutes of that, and then you take about 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm going to throw it back over to you and let you round us out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Finish us out for the morning. Yeah, this is excellent information. Yeah, I mean, every morning we turn on the television, you know, just so senseless, you know, going to Planet Hollywood, no, is it Planet
Fitness?
Yeah, Planet Fitness, and knocking out the windows on cars, and young people.
Yeah.
Young people. And and they never get away with it. You know, it'd be different. Oh man.
Yeah. We have a juvenile task force that is trying to find.
All right, stand by.
We could use this as a solution. Talk about that. Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Buford and Pastor Walker in reference to the criminal justice system in Tennessee. Let's see, Mr. Buford, if we can start with you during this last segment of the show to give you an opportunity to talk about what you might consider to be some of the solutions. We've talked about some of the problems, but what are some of the solutions that we might find?
Well, on the front end, we have to start investing more in education because as it stands, we only invest like maybe $10,000 per student, but we spend roughly $30,000 a year to incarcerate one individual. As it relates to being in the system, one way we can help is to create transformative programs that engage individuals who are caged in a way that they have to use their minds to do some critical thinking. Because as it stands, these rehabilitation programs are memory-oriented or behavior-oriented. You can act it out, but that never transforms you from the inside out. We also have to become stakeholders in outcomes at parole hearings. As it stands, the state of Tennessee has about 18,000 parole hearings a year, and less than 5,000 people are released from prison. You have individuals sitting on parole boards making $5,000 a month that do not even live in our communities. And so when people go up for parole, they should be evaluated for their suitability for release, but what we have is they are retried. And so my hope is that the faith communities will begin to come into these parole hearings and support individuals coming back, engage in relationship building so that when these individuals come back into the community, unlike the prodigal son who was rejected by his brother, we can have the father who will fatten the calf, meaning somebody comes out, what do you need? How can we help you provide for yourself? What are your goals, your aspirations? Not a handout, but a hand up. One other thing we can do is that help us move toward entrepreneurship when we get out of prison. Because what I found to be true for myself, I have a cosmetologist instructor's license. I've been cutting hair since I was 12 years old. I do it on the side now because this work that I'm doing now, I feel is much more important, that I talk about the realities that human beings are facing within this criminal injustice system. And last, as I want to say about this, I want to thank everyone who goes into a prison. Because when you can go into a prison and sit with someone who has been condemned, you humanize that person. And when you humanize that person, the light comes on. And when that light comes on, the 95% of individuals who are going to be released, you stand a better chance at a better person coming out of prison.
Pastor?
You know, a lot's being said, and you know, I admire what Rehim is doing and with his organization, Unheard Voices, because there's a definite need. There's a need out there for those of us who are formerly incarcerated to get involved. And what I do find too also is that many of us who are have been formerly incarcerated are not willing to get involved in helping those who are yet still incarcerated, although we've been released and stuff like that. And I understand some of the stigma that goes along with that. You know, I think there's a measure of fear from the system itself, you know, that will maybe perhaps come after them in some kind of way, especially when you're on parole and stuff like that. But at the same time, you know, there's a higher standard, there's a higher calling that's involved when we must esteem others greater than ourselves and get into the trenches and help others. So I've never had a fear of what the system may do to me as a result of that. And of course, I've had my program, the Hands of God Recovery Ministries, that I ran in the past, helping many people that was incarcerated in the system get out and, you know, get them on a pathway to living in a just and in society. I had my program blacklisted by the then, not the parole board, but the the supervision aspect part of that deal, I can't put the name on it right now because it's been transferred into TDOC now, but it was the Department of Probations and Parole. They blacklisted me and took my program off of the list, so I was therefore unable to bring people out of the system into my program. One of the things I was doing, I was not charging people. If they didn't have the money to come out, I wouldn't charge them. There was many other organization things that were charging them when they did come out, and I wouldn't do that, you know. And it didn't matter to me if there was a sex offender or whatever. I would take anybody into my program. I didn't care what crime they committed or anything, because I believe that a person can be transformed if you get inside of a person's heart and the mindset and try to help them develop and identify who they really are, as opposed to how they have been labeled to be. Then you can bring that person through a transformational process, and they begin to become productive and constructive citizens of our society. But to look at this, you have to look at the whole picture. And I think that many of us who are formerly incarcerated also have a desire to get in and to help, but we have been stymied a lot of time in our efforts to do so. In other words, they won't allow us the access that we should have, because who could better help somebody that's going through something than somebody has already gone through it and has avoided the pitfall, been caught up in the pitfall, overcome it, triumphed over, and made our way past that and living productive lives now. We're better qualified to help than anybody that may say perhaps have a social psychology degree or what have you, but have never experienced what we've experienced, have never been behind that fence, have never been behind that wall in the state prison system, and have never have to deal with an environment where tension can be so high on any given day that you can almost cut it with a knife. You know, we know what it's about. We know how to deal. We know how the people get up and how they interact and how they think and how they do what they do. But like I say, I'm not here to talk, man. I need to hear from this brother, because this brother got a wealth of information. Been wanting to get him on here for a while, and he's here, and I need to be quiet and listen.
Okay, Buford, you've got about 3 minutes. What are some of the things you want to leave us with this morning?
Well, the first thing I want to say that every human being has inherent worth. And we have to do away with a system that places more value on black and brown bodies caged in prisons than they do for those who are out here working.
You use that word, Mr. Buford,
Yes,
cage.
sir.
I think
Yes,
you
sir.
said you use it 3 or 4. What do
Yes,
you mean?
sir.
How do you, when you say that, what comes out when you say that?
I use that term because I want to give society an idea of what you really feel like when you are inside of what we call incarcerated, what we call confined. Those are sanitized terms for me because they do not denote the realities of the pain, the misery, the violence, the suffering, the restriction, the deprivation, all of the things that you experience on the inside. When the system frames it, it does an injustice to the reality of the experience itself. So my mentor, Reverend Janet Wolfe, she said, brother, you know you were caged. Don't be ashamed to admit that. And I've been talking about it ever since. Yes, sir. And so I guess what I want to say is we have to put people in places in the system who care about human beings. Because if you care about what you're doing, the way that you treat me will have a direct effect on how I treat others. And so we got to get away from people working in this system because they want to get revenge. Revenge is up to God.
You
It's not up
find that to
us.
be quite common in the system?
Unfortunately so. I find it quite common. For example, I was taking Vanderbilt Divinity School courses while I was at Riverbend Maximum Security Prison. And later I would take some American Baptist College courses. And then Lipscomb. Individuals who worked there felt like we should not be educated. And I didn't understand it because one post-secondary education class reduces recidivism by 20%. If you complete a college education, you have like almost 0% recidivism.
And so it's important in terms of the terms that you use and the attitude that they take in reference to what you're doing. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, sir.
And so, Pastor